Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive.
Today we're looking into an interesting media debate that's been going on.
Yeah.
It's between Anderson Cooper and Charlamagne Thigod.
Mm-hmm.
And, it started out as like this, back and forth about Trump and Kamala Harris.
Yeah.
But it's kind of become about something bigger, right?
Yeah.
It's how the media covers these huge political figures.
And whether certain viewpoints get more airtime than others.
Exactly.
So like, are we really getting the full picture, or is there like some kind of bias happening?
Yeah, it's a huge question, and it's something that like everyone who consumes news should be thinking about.
Totally. So let's break this down because it gets pretty intense.
Okay.
So Charlamagne comes out swinging, right?
Yeah.
He's like straight up accusing news stations of like not calling out Trump's behavior.
Yeah.
Which he labels as like fascist.
Right. And that's a strong word.
Oh, yeah. Super loaded term.
So we got to be careful about throwing that around.
For sure. For sure.
But I mean, What specifically is he referring to, right?
He gives this example, which I thought was interesting.
Okay.
He's basically saying that news outlets will spend all this time on like what he considers fringe theories.
Like what?
Like questioning Kamala Harris's black identity.
Interesting.
And he's saying they're doing this instead of focusing on like what he considers the real issue, which is Trump's actions.
So he's suggesting a sort of hierarchy of importance, right?
Yeah. And he's like, why are we giving airtime to this stuff when there are these other things happening that are arguably way more pressing?
And it raises the question of like, what even is newsworthy, right?
Oh,
like
great.
Who decides that?
Yeah. And is it really just about ratings, or is there something deeper going on?
Right. Because, I mean, you could argue that like questioning someone's identity, that's pretty sensational.
Totally. And that's going to get people clicking and watching.
Exactly. So is that what's driving these decisions, or is there like a genuine journalistic reason for covering those stories?
It's a tough one.
It is.
Now, of course, Cooper doesn't just take this lying down, right?
He comes back and is like, hey, hold on. We do talk about these issues.
Mm-hmm.
He's saying it happens on his show all the time.
Okay, so he's pushing back on the idea that these topics are being completely ignored.
Exactly. But then he does admit something interesting.
What's that?
He says they've had some guests on that are a little out there, let's say, to represent diverse perspectives.
Okay, so he's acknowledging that they give a platform to a wide range of viewpoints.
Yeah, even some that might be considered like fringe or controversial.
And that's where things get really tricky, right?
Totally.
Because it's not just about whether something is reported, but how it's reported.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, the framing.
Like you could have a news segment that shows a clip of Trump saying something super controversial.
Right.
But how is it presented?
Yeah, like, is there critical commentary?
Right. Is it balanced with other viewpoints?
Or is it just like presented as is, which could almost like legitimize it in a way?
Exactly. Those subtle choices in how the information is framed can have a huge impact on how viewers interpret it.
So it's not necessarily about lying or spreading misinformation.
Right.
It's more about the lens you're looking through.
Precisely.
Okay, so we've got Charlamagne saying they're not covering the important stuff.
We've got Cooper saying, hey, we're covering it.
Mm-hmm.
But then Charlamagne doesn't let up.
He keeps going.
Oh, yeah. He's like still hammering on this lack of critical coverage of Trump.
And what does Cooper say to that?
Cooper's response is interesting.
He's basically like, everyone has seen and heard everything Trump has said.
But does that really address the criticism, though?
Well, that's the thing, right?
Yeah.
Like, is it enough to just present Trump's words without any analysis?
Right, because you need context. You need to help people understand the implications of what he's saying.
Exactly. And that's like a key difference, right?
Mm-hmm.
The amount of coverage versus the type of coverage.
Yeah.
Like a 10-second soundbite of Trump saying something crazy is very different from like a deep dive into what that statement actually means.
Totally. It's like the difference between just giving information and actually helping people understand it.
And then get this, while this whole debate is raging,
Kamala Harris holds a press conference.
Oh, wow.
And she brings up accusations against Trump that are literally straight out of an article in The Atlantic.
Which article?
The one that calls him a fascist and a tyrant-in-waiting.
Wow, so she's using the same language that's being used in this media debate.
It's wild, right?
It is. It's like this whole thing is playing out in real time.
And I know we can't say for sure, but it makes you wonder, like, did she do that on purpose?
Yeah. Was this press conference a direct response to the Cooper-Charlamagne back and forth?
Because it's pretty fascinating that politicians are like so aware of these media critiques.
Right. And that they might even be shaping their communication strategies based on them.
It's like a whole new level of like meta media stuff.
It really is.
So zooming out for a second.
It seems like the core of this whole debate is about balance.
Yeah.
Is the media giving equal weight to all viewpoints?
Or are some narratives getting amplified while others are getting minimized?
Right. And I think that's a question we all need to be asking ourselves too as consumers of news.
Totally.
Especially now with the internet and social media, like, how do we know we're getting a balanced view?
Yeah, it's so easy to get stuck in like an echo chamber.
Exactly. So it's on us to actively seek out diverse perspectives.
And to be critical thinkers.
Absolutely. We can't just passively absorb information.
You should question it.
And we have to be aware of our own biases.
Yeah, because we all have them.
We do.
This has been a really interesting conversation.
Yeah, it has.
It's made me think a lot about how I consume news and how I can be more media literate.
That's great to hear.
So thanks for diving into this with me.
Of course, anytime.
And to everyone listening, I hope this has given you some things to think about as well.
See you next time for another deep dive.